Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The wind chime on my front porch speaks before anyone does. It tattles to the tide, to the moss-hung oaks, to the mailman who never looks up. This morning it tattled to me. The breeze tilted the blue glass into a soft clatter as my daughter's key turned in the lock and her voice slipped down the hallway like steam. "Trent, keep your voice low," Sloan said, not yet aware. I was awake on the living room sofa. The administrator at Maple Ridge emailed back. "A private room opens after New Year's. If I get the guardianship papers in by Friday, we're set." Trent's reply was a murmur the kind men use when they don't want to be responsible for the words. The Ring doorbell chimed behind them, another package, probably vitamins with inspirational labels. The wind chime answered, and I let my eyelids droop to crescents and made the soft, uneven exhale she recognizes as my old lady nap. I am 72, which is not a number that frightens me. Numbers rarely do. I spent 3 decades teaching criminal law at the University of South Carolina, where careless phrasing ruins cases and lazy evidence breaks them. My late husband James ran a small carpentry shop and told every apprentice a clean line tells on you if you don't respect it. James is gone now, 3 months and a handful of days, and our house creaks in places only he could quiet. Sloan moved in to help the week after the funeral. She brought suitcases and her blender. "Morning, Mama," she sang, already in the kitchen, already assembling the tableau, oat milk banana powder collagen with a label that promised radiance. The blender roared. She poured the smoothie into the blue tumbler James used for lemonade and set it on a linen coaster as if I were a guest in my own house. "It helps with your sleep," she said. "Dr. Lowell says grief wrecks the circadian rhythm." "Does it?" I said, and the brain fog came on cue, thick as humidity after a thunderhead. It had started in April, a soft-cornered tiredness that sanded down my sentences and laid mischief in my memory. I would drift for an hour, wake with a cotton mouth, and forget the end of whatever story I was telling. Sloan would log another note on her phone, confusion at 10:07 a.m., agitation at noon, afternoon nap, unrefreshing. She showed me the log, once all bullet points and pity. When she arrived, my calendar filled with kindness. She took over the HOA emails and told them to stop bothering me about the neighbor's pit bull and the lawn waste bin. She RSVP'd to the church potluck with a smiling "so grateful," and then wrote again to say I needed quiet. "Now please remove me from the list." She sent a polite decline to the PTA fundraiser next door and another to the book club I've been part of for 20 years. "People mean well," she murmured, "but crowds confuse you lately." "People don't confuse me. Lies do." I began noticing how precise her routine was. 8 o'clock smoothie, 8:10 the blue tumbler back in the sink, rinsed, no residue. 8:15 Sloan's whisper in the hallway while Trent scrolled job boards in the dining room and pretended he was sure of anything. 9 a call on speaker to Dr. Lowell, the telehealth physician who had never met me but kept agreeing with Sloan's observations about sundowning that had apparently moved to mid-morning in my case. I told myself grief can look like forgetfulness. It can. It can also look like someone rewriting you one bullet point at a time. The rosemary pot on my porch told the truth first. I had begun to pour a little of the smoothie into the soil on mornings when Sloan's footsteps retreated to the back bedroom and Trent shifted into his apologetic silence. By Thursday, the rosemary dulled at the tips. By Sunday, the whole plant blushed brown. I didn't stop drinking altogether, not yet. Habit is a shape the body trusts even when the mind knows better. But I learned the kitchen's choreography. I learned the plastic clink of the supplement tub and the way Sloan cupped her palm around the rim of the blender jar to shield whatever she palmed into it. I learned that if I took small sips and kept my mouth soft, she stopped watching me. "What day is it?" she asked sweetly one morning. "The one where you move my pillbox," I said. She laughed like I had made a joke. That morning's HOA email pinged my phone with a reminder about the annual meeting. I set the phone to vibrate and let the wind chime account for any noise. "Aunt Evie asked about you," Sloan added. "I told her you're resting. She shouldn't pop by. It agitates you." Evie isn't my aunt. She is my neighbor, a retired nurse with hands like gospel and opinions that cut. We share recipes and in some seasons a back fence for gossip. Evie does not agitate me. She steadies me. Sloan knows this. That's why she's keeping Evie away. "Bless your heart," I said mildly, and Sloan's smile faltered for a breath. "James used to say that sorrow makes people efficient. They pack casseroles and condolences into schedules like Tetris pieces. Sloan's efficiency was different. It had an edge." She began bringing in my mail, sorting it, and leaving only the soft envelopes on my tray. The bank statements arrived with slits so tidy they looked machine-made. When I asked Trent whether he'd seen the letter from the county assessor about property values, He pressed his lips into a line and said Sloan had it handled. Handled is a verb that in my experience means don't ask again. I tested my recall on purpose. At breakfast, I recited our address, then paused halfway through, then continued watching Sloan's face. Surprise flashed and vanished like a dolphin fin. She adjusted my pillbox. I watched her fingertips, her nails, neatly buffed her ring a modest oval because Trent's employment had never quite found a shoreline. She set the box down open, then shut it again, then moved it a few inches to the left as if the location itself had dosage. After she left to call Maple Ridge from the back porch, I stood very still in my kitchen and took inventory. The blender lived clean on the counter. The powdered collagen tub wore a bright sticker that said, "Better sleep." Inside the spice cabinet, the cinnamon jar had a faint dusting not of cinnamon, but of something finer. My hands know the weight of glass and lid. The jar had been opened more often than a person uses cinnamon. The electric kettle's app, James installed it so he could coddle water for tea at 190 degrees, showed a daily spike at 7:52 a.m., a habit that wasn't mine. I took notations without moving anything. I have no wish to tip an opponent that she's being scouted. I poured that morning's smoothie into the sink and watched the swirl go past the drain cross like a small storm. I refilled the blue tumbler with tap water and added exactly 1 sip's worth of smoothie back to cloud it. When Sloan returned, she gave me the benevolent check a nurse gives a good patient and kissed my forehead. "Church sent another casserole," she said. "Green bean. Tell them I said thank you." "I did," she said, and the ring chimed again. I lay down on the sofa as if I meant to. I am not above theater when the audience is my daughter. My eyes closed, my ears didn't. I heard Trent say the words power of attorney with the cautious pride of a teenager trying a cuss word. I heard Sloan answer in a cadence I recognized from the courtroom, steady, practiced, reasonable. My wind chime tattled again. When they left for the store, I took my phone from the credenza and typed a message with deliberate slowness so my hands wouldn't shake. "Don't knock. Come through the side gate if you can. Ruth." I sent it to Evie Brooks and set the phone face down on the coaster beside the blue tumbler. The rosemary on the porch held its silence. The house did too. I let the wind chime tell the neighborhood what it always does, that somebody is home and listening. Evie came through the side gate like she'd been crossing thresholds quietly her whole life. She wore scrubs the color of sea glass and a cardigan with elbows polished by years of leaning in. I met her in the mudroom between the washer and the back door where the house smells like Tide and cedar balls and something faintly metallic that isn't supposed to be there. "Don't hug me," she said gently. "Let me look at you first." I let her look. She checked my pupils with a penlight, tapped a tendon with 2 fingers, asked me to squeeze her hands. I squeezed. She nodded once. "How long since you had the smoothie?" "Today I let the rosemary drink it. That plant always did have your back." She peered down the hallway toward the kitchen. "At the store with Trent. Chicken breasts and moral superiority." Evie's mouth twitched. She pulled a small kit from her cardigan pocket, swabs little plastic vials with white caps, a folded paper for notes. She was a nurse before retirement, which means she still is. "Spit for me," she said, passing me a vial. "And if you can spare a teaspoon of whatever she's been pouring into you, we'll take that too." In the kitchen, I unscrewed the blender jar. The inside smelled like banana and cinnamon and something chalky that didn't belong to either. Evie swabbed the rim, the spout, the base of the lid, where residue likes to brag. She labeled each vial with a date and a time in a hand nurses develop so pharmacists don't curse them. "You're steady," she said. "If she calls a doctor and says you're wandering, she's the one wandering from the truth. She's been logging my confusion. Then we log better." Evie's eyes went to the spice rack. "You've been using cinnamon more than usual? I see it's been getting attention." She reached up and took the jar down. When she twisted the lid, I heard a whisper of grit at the threads. Cinnamon doesn't whisper like that. It sighs. She peered at the mouth of the jar, then at the underside of the lid. "You mind if I borrow your cinnamon for a week?" she asked. "Depends. What for?" "A little hobby. I like cameras that don't look like cameras." "Take the jar," I said, and Evie smiled like church music. We stood together at the kitchen island and made a ledger, not a diary. Diaries can be mocked as sentimental. A ledger is numbers and facts and where the money or the molecules went. Time of smoothie amount consumed, any symptoms, any naps. The electric kettle logs at 7:52 a.m., the blender run length, the trash day, when I'd seen a pharmacy bag mouth up like a fish on asphalt. We listed my meds, the ones I actually take, and the ones Sloan had begun to pronounce like a magician, Zolpidem alprazolam. Her tongue precise on the Z's and the long A like she was tasting power. Evie had names. She called Dr. Maya Patel from my landline so the caller ID wouldn't betray me. Maya was laced with caution and compassion. "I can see you this afternoon," she said. "No portal, no uploads, just come. If anyone asks, you're getting your flu shot." Evie offered to drive. I declined. I'm still licensed and still stubborn. I left Sloan a note that said going next door to Evie's for tea. Be back by 2. I picked up my purse and the cinnamon jar Evie had somehow returned to the rack, with a new lid that looked identical to the old one and probably wasn't. Charleston in midday is a dazzled city. Heat lifts off the cobbles and bends air into a shimmer. The clinic sat in a brick building that used to be a post office, the kind of adaptive reuse that flatters both medicine and memory. Dr. Patel met me herself at the door, no nurse in between. Professor Carter, she said, I've read your work. I hope you read the footnotes. That's where I behaved myself. She laughed, then ushered me into a room with calm walls and a window that framed a live oak. No one was on the other side of the glass. I checked anyway. The exam was meticulous. Memory lists, backward month serial 7s, pattern recall with shapes I wanted to rearrange into furniture, grip strength gait reflexes. She took blood for toxicology, 2 purple top tubes, 1 gray, then clipped a small lock of hair near the nape where no one would notice. She labeled everything herself and sealed each label with a little press of her thumb like an oath. You're oriented, intact, and sharper than the fluorescence, she said. If something is wrong, it isn't you. Evie thinks sedatives. I think data, Dr. Patel said. We'll rush this through a lab I trust. Back home, Sloan had reset the living room into benevolence, throw blanket folded. The coaster centered under the blue tumbler, the television tuned to a nature program with river otters behaving like they'd signed for it. She paused the show when I came in and studied my face like a painting that had changed overnight. Where'd you run off to? She asked lightly. Evie wanted to show me the new hydrangea. It's the kind that fights for blue, I said, and set my purse down with a weight that wasn't my purse. Good. Fresh air is good, she said, and moved my pillbox half an inch to the left. I'll make your smoothie. I watched her hands. She had the choreography exact, the oat milk tilt, the measured scoop, the banana slices like coins. The cinnamon jar came open with the new lid's whisper. When she poured, the blender roared. When she brought the glass to me, she lingered the way nurses linger long enough to see you swallow. I'll sip, I said. I'm cold. She tucked the blanket around my knees as if I were frail. She took a picture me with the tumbler, me with the throw, me with the obedient smile, and then she texted it to someone. I didn't ask who. I don't interrogate the weather. I carry an umbrella. The ledger grew. At 8:04 the next morning, a notch of smoothie went to the sink and another to the rosemary. At 9:13, a neighbor texted to ask if I was all right because Sloan had told her I had wandered into the street last week. At 10:22, a polite email from the HOA asked if I needed accommodations for mobility. I answered none. I noted Sloan's calls Dr. Lowell at 9:30 Maple Ridge. At 11:05, a realtor she said was just curious at noon. Trent hovered around the refrigerator like it owed him something. He practiced sentences about contract work that never added up to a contract. Trash day confessed on schedule. The pharmacy bag in the bin had a loyalty coupon stapled to it. Evie fished it out with tongs like a prize at a church fair. The printed part listed sleep aid in generic terms, but the cashier had written a smiley face and "Thank you, Sloan" across the top in pen. We folded the bag into the ledger. That afternoon, the cinnamon lid paid rent. Evie took the jar home and came back at dusk with her tablet and the kind of grin that makes women 3 towns over sit up straighter without knowing why. Watch, she said. The video was black and white and tilted at spice rack height. It saw the countertop the way a cat does, keen on hands. Sloan entered frame with the blender jar and the tub that promised radiance. She measured oat milk banana collagen. Then, with her body turned 1 degree away from the camera, like she knew cameras existed, but not that one, she reached into her cardigan pocket and shook 2 small tablets into her palm. She crushed them with the back of a spoon against the cutting board scrape, then swept the powder into the jar and pulsed the blender for a second like a heartbeat. We watched it twice. On the 3rd pass, Evie paused at the scrape, then ran it again with sound turned up. A clean, granular rasp. Not cinnamon, I said. Not cinnamon, she agreed. She touched the screen and captured Still's handspoon powder sweep. Each still slid into a folder with the same care a librarian gives to first editions. Your bank, she asked next, as if we were just moving to the next room in the same house. The statements come pre-opened, I said, and my online password changed itself last week. We sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The browser had been wiped of history like a saint of sins. Saints don't use private browsing, but daughters do. I reset the password and stepped through the security like a person who has taught juries what a chain of custody is. The checking account showed transfers that thought they were clever Zelle payments with memo lines that said re-utilities to names I didn't recognize, and a series of $2,000 e-gift purchases to a general inbox at Seabreeze Towers with a subject deposit hold. I clicked through the PDFs and felt the familiar cold that sits in the gut of anyone who has read a bad contract and recognized their own name inside it. Evie didn't say I told you so. She put a post-it on the screen with numbers to call that weren't the numbers Sloan would think to intercept. We printed what needed printing and copied what needed copying. I slid each page into a manila folder and wrote ledger on the tab because the word reassures me. At 6:10 p.m., while Sloan and Trent discussed chicken breasts bone-in or not, as if bones were the moral dilemma, the landline rang. I let the machine take it. Dr. Patel's voice was low and exact. "Ruth, it's Maya. Your blood work came back with benzodiazepines at a level that is medically concerning for someone not prescribed them. The hair segment indicates ongoing exposure over multiple months. I'm notifying a colleague who coordinates with the county on suspected elder abuse. I'll also document your cognitive testing today as above expected for age. Call me when you can." Evie and I didn't move for a breath. The wind chime outside ticked once like punctuation. In the dining room, Trent said something about marinades, as if marinades were a country. I picked up the receiver and said, "Thank you, doctor." Then I hung up and slid the manila folder to the center of the desk, right where James used to put blueprints when he wanted me to argue with them until they stood up straight. The message light on my landline blinked like a metronome that had found its tempo. Evie pressed play with the back of a knuckle, the way nurses touch things in rooms where people bruise easily. Dr. Patel's voice repeated the numbers and the words, benzodiazepines and ongoing exposure and above expected. Evie wrote each phrase on the ledger as if the ledger had always waited for them. We didn't discuss whether to call back. We called. Dr. Patel answered on the first ring, her consonants crisp. "I'd like you to speak with an assistant district attorney who handles elder exploitation," she said. "I've already prepared the referral. If anyone in your home monitors the phone, we can arrange an in-person." "The phone is a sieve," I said. "Come if you can." She did. She arrived with a man whose suit fit like he ate his meals standing. He introduced himself as Luis Romero, assistant district attorney for the county. His handshake measured exactly enough pressure to say, "I'm here and not a pound more." Beside him stood a woman in a plain blazer, hair-braided neat eyes that moved like a person counting exits. "Detective Nora Bell," he said, "Elder Abuse Task Force." They sat at my dining table, the same place James used to lay out cabinet faces like a deck of cards before committing to a kitchen. I brought the ledger, Evie brought the cinnamon jar lid and her tablet. No one brought pity. "Walk us through your mornings," Detective Bell said. She didn't open a notebook yet. She let the table do that for her. I described the smoothie, the steps, the rosemary pot, the ring chime. Evie set the tablet up, angled toward them. She pulled up the Spice Rack video and hit play. The cat-eye vantage made hands look guilty even when they were not. When they were, the camera didn't have to try. "Pause there, ADA," Romero said. He pointed with 2 fingers, not a jab. "That pocket. Is that a cardigan she wears often?" "Her uniform," I said. "Professional daughter." He said without looking up. "Chain of custody. Jar stayed in my locket pantry, except when Evie had it to install the lid," I said. "We dated the install and every time we removed it. The kitchen is under my control." "Good," he said. He clicked through stills, then the bank PDFs. "You recognize the names on these Zelle transfers?" "No." He nodded again once. "We'll subpoena loyalty records from her pharmacy and verify Dr. Lowell's licensure and prescribing patterns. Telehealth has made some people bold." Detective Bell finally opened her notebook. "I need you to do a difficult thing," she said, eyes on mine. "For the next stretch of days, keep everything exactly the same on the surface. Drink from the glass she expects you to drink from. Move the pillbox the way she moved it. If she believes her plan is working, she'll escalate in predictable ways. We document escalation. I don't intend to swallow what she serves me," I said. "You don't have to," Bell said. "You only have to look like you do." "Act confused," Evie said, not unkindly. "I can act," I said. "I just resent my audience." "We'll work around this audience," ADA, Romero said. "We'll move quickly. We've got probable cause for tampering and financial exploitation. If your physician's report corroborates ongoing exposure, we add attempted poisoning." "Don't use the word attempted," I said. She succeeded. His eyes softened a fraction. "He didn't tell me I was brave. He asked for my phone, instead scrolled through settings and showed me what he toggled off. If she's logged into your accounts, she'll notice changes," he said. "We make the quiet ones." They left with the cinnamon lid, a copy of the ledger, and a promise to walk paperwork through overnight. When the door shut, the house reset to its soundscape, a clock in the hallway, the fridge's occasional complaint, the wind chime gossiping in a shifting breeze. Sloan returned 3 minutes later with a bag of chicken and a tone that suggested I had been out of line somehow, somewhere. "You went quiet on me," she said, dropping the groceries on the counter with carelessness that could shatter eggs and not be her fault. "Next time, leave a note." "It's on the coaster," I said. She glanced at the neat square of paper like it had interrupted her trajectory. Then she moved my pillbox a half-inch to the right as if she aimed all outcomes by increments. That night, she sat on my sofa and showed me a website of luxury independent living communities, all airy hallways and staged smiles. "Just browsing," she said. "Bless your heart," I said out of habit. The phrase has uses. When I couldn't sleep, I went to James's workshop. The door stuck in a way I had never bothered to fix. He called it sincere wood when things swelled in summer. The shop smelled like sawdust and linseed and the stern kindness of sandpaper. His bench was clear except for the coffee ring he refused to admit was his. I ran my finger over it like a relic. James built organ pipes once for a church that had lost its music. He said precision was a kind of prayer. In the bottom drawer of his bench was a file folder with my name in his print-reliable block letters confident in their own straightness. I lifted the tab. Inside a letter he hadn't mailed. "Ruth," it began, and then, "if this feels foolish, forgive me. I found notes on Sloane's laptop side effects and elderly guardianship timelines, POA forms plus our names. Could be work curiosity, doesn't feel like work. If I'm wrong, I'll be relieved to be wrong. If I'm right, look under the false bottom." He'd drawn a little diagram the way he would for apprentice hands that hadn't learned a tool's stubbornness yet. I looked. The bottom wasn't a panel so much as a promise. It lifted when you knew how to ask. Beneath it, a flash drive and a spiral notebook. The notebook held dates and sites scribbled like a man fighting his own body for time. The drive, when I plugged it into my laptop, opened to screenshots, search histories, PDF, downloads a spreadsheet titled Guardianship Budget with my name and line items for memory care, private room, monthly stipend S&H, and a column called Cell House in bold. The word cell in James's hand would have meant fair price hardwood floors that didn't lie a buyer who promised not to rip out the heart of a craftsman for shiplap. In Sloane's spreadsheet, it meant a number that swallowed us and spit out an ocean view. I printed what needed printing and slid the drive into the manila folder. When I stood up, the workshop light found a path through the dust. It made columns out of what was suspended in air. I breathed sawdust and old coffee and a resolve that doesn't belong to the young. Then I locked the drawer, the shop, the door to the house behind me. Phone calls flowered. ADA Romero again this time, with names for subpoenas and a tone that had lost whatever patience it brought to my table. Detective Bell ran Maple Ridge through her system and found intake emails that read like Sloane had written them with a trembling lip in a mirror. Dr. Patel faxed a formal capacity assessment, intact cognition that would hold up in court. Evie measured and installed and watched the kitchen as if it were a stage where blocking mattered. Sloane pressed on. She took a photo of my pillbox and sent it to a group chat labeled Care Team, a phrase that made my teeth ache. She answered my landline before the second ring when it displayed numbers she didn't recognize. She called my brother to say I had become combative, a word that can be made to fit any sigh if you push. Trent delivered packages that smelled like lemon cleaner and declared the house safer for it. I let them. The ledger let nothing. When the realtor left his card on my porch, I flipped it over. On the blank side, a note, "Call if you reconsider listing. Inventory is low." The handwriting was hopeful. Profession does that to people. I placed it in the folder with Seabreeze Towers. News travels the way humidity does in Charleston, everywhere at once. A columnist at the Historical Society posted a piece about legacy homes and the kindness of donors who convert private dwellings into public good. He mentioned a craftsman on my block with leaded glass and a magnolia that remembers more than most people do. He didn't name me, but people don't need names when the wind chime is already telling them what they crave. Sloane's eyes changed when she read it. She smiled without lifting her cheeks. "You're making impulsive choices," she said. "We need to talk long-term." "We do," I said, and adjusted the ledger so the tab faced the room like a compass. 3 days later, the Atlantic shrugged off politeness. Weather alerts stacked in my inbox: coastal flood advisory, gale warning, a nor'easter named, like a retiree, plain and underinformed gathering, just offshore. The sky went the color of a bruise that hasn't decided what it wants to be. Evie texted a grocery list of batteries and common sense. Detective Bell called from somewhere that echoed and said simply, "Keep your phone charged." Power flickered at twilight and then let go. The neighborhood fell into the kind of dark that makes you remember what candles are for. My house hummed with a generator line James had insisted on after the last time we ate soup by headlamp. Sloane stood at the window, phone raised like a torch. "We should go to Maple Ridge," she said, as if storms had clinics too. "They have backup." "I have backup," I said. She waited for me to elaborate. I did not. She went to her room and shut the door with a soft finality that wasn't final. Trent paced. The wind chime outside learned a new language of metal and air. By midnight, rain knit itself so tight across the street that porch lights dissolved into a smear. The Ring doorbell went dumb with the rest of the block. My generator held, but the building where it lived grumbled a different sound. I watched the hallway and the door to my bedroom as if watching could keep doors honest. Sloane didn't sleep. I heard her moving the careful quiet of someone who has practiced not waking people. The cinnamon jar remained on the rack, the lid aligned like a soldier. The blender sat under its dish towel as if modesty could clean it. The blue tumbler stood rinsed, no scent at all. At 1 a.m., the wind shifted. Doors that had never known one another spoke through the framing. In the lull between gusts, another sound threaded the air softer than a knock, distinct from rain. Metal consenting to metal. The patio slider on the seaside wall did what it has never done without my hand. It eased. The latch accepted a persuasion it wasn't built to admire. The pain moved on its track with a sound I felt in my jaw. I sat in my chair and let my breathing choose a rhythm that looked like sleep from a distance. The room held its new draft. A figure stepped through the opening hood, backlit by lightning that refused to pick a side. She stood just inside and did not announce herself. She didn't have to. Sloane pushed the hood down and shook rain off her hair like a woman back from a late swim. She closed the slider gently with the tool she shouldn't know how to use and set it on the console table with the delicacy of a gift. "Evening, Mama," she said into the dark voice, low, pleased with itself. The wind chime outside kept talking to whoever listens to wind. The house mind stayed very still. Sloane let the room measure her. She kept her hands visible, palms loose at her sides, the way people do when they want credit for not breaking anything yet. "You don't sleep," she said. "Figures." "I nap creatively," I said, eyes still half-lidded. She drifted not toward me, but around me, tracing the perimeter like she owned the concept of edges. Rain braided itself across the balcony. The slider whispered shut behind her with the intimacy of a secret. "Locks are for people who believe in locks," she said, setting a slim tool, a bump key with a soft rubber crown on my console like a calling card. "You should thank me for testing your security." "I'll send a note to the manufacturer," I said. "Dear sirs, my daughter has opinions." She smiled without warmth and stepped to the mantel, fingering a photograph of James in his shop apron sawdust, stippling his forearms like freckles. She tilted the frame a degree left, then right, then left again, until it met an angle only she understood. "You and Dad," she said, not asking. "Always building, always measuring. It must be exhausting to be so finished." "I prefer plum," I said. "Finished is for coffins." She laughed once quick. Then she turned to me with a brightness that belonged in a showroom. "Let's quit pretending, Mama. You're lucid enough when you want to be, and I'm resourceful enough to prove any story I need. We can make this civilized." "Civilized is a couch you sit on without rearranging the room," I said, and shifted my knees under the throw as if I were searching for comfort, not a signal. Her eyes flicked to my hands. "You're shaking." "Age," I said. "Act," she said, amused. "I studied theater, remember sophomore year, acting for non-majors. They said I had presence." She turned her face so the room could admire it. Lightning obliged with a sketch. "Presence isn't the same as character," I said. "That's what people with no presence say." She angled toward the kitchen, toward the spice rack that had watched her. "You've been wasting good ingredients. Oat milk's not cheap." "Neither are lawyers," I said, and the air shifted just a fraction. Sloane's chin tipped. "Is that who you called the nice doctor who says you can do serial sevens in your sleep? A county lawyer who wants to put on a cape?" She took one step, then another, until she could see the ledger's tab peeking from the basket on the end table. She didn't touch it. She wanted me to know she'd seen it. "You think paperwork makes you safe?" she asked. "Paperwork is an art. You taught me that." The right phrase, the right signature, the right witnesses who remember exactly what they're told. "You remember what you're told?" I asked. "That's new." She leaned closer and I could see where the rain had fretted her mascara. "You don't get to make jokes," she said softly. "You don't get to turn this into one of your lectures with footnotes. You've been sleeping through your life for months, and I've been making sure the house doesn't burn down while you nap." "By removing matches," I said, "or by striking them?" She didn't flinch. "By choosing the future over nostalgia." A movement to my left, felt not seen, nudged the scene a half inch. The hallway kept its breath. The generator hummed like an alibi. "You chose a storm for theater," I said. "Dramatic?" "I chose privacy," she said. "Your ring is blind. Your neighbors are asleep. Trent thinks I'm sulking in our room. You hate confrontation in front of an audience, so..." She spread her hands as if unveiling a kitchen remodel. "I brought you a private one." "You brought yourself one," I said. She cocked her head, a sparrow assessing a crumb. "You always make me the villain when I'm the only one willing to make a plan." "You made a budget," I said. "It had line items. If you saw that spreadsheet, you snooped. If you wrote it, you confessed." She stepped back and something in her composure sharpened from showroom to blade. "You can't win this by semantics, Mama. I have months of logs, a doctor who signs what I put in front of him, care coordinators who adore me. You wandered. You lashed out. You forgot people's names. Maple Ridge is ready. I'm ready. You're not." "Bless your heart," I said, and folded the throw from my knees. The lights came on. Not a flicker, not a tease. Full illumination hall lamps and kitchen cans, and the quiet authority of recessed LEDs blooming to life. Sloane's pupils pinpricked. She knew better than to whirl, but the body wants what it wants. Her shoulders twitched toward the hallway. Out of the kitchen, from the guest room, from the patio door she had so deftly opened, they stepped Detective Nora Bell. First voice already carrying the sentence structure of custody. 2 officers behind her in plain clothes. Evie in my cardigan eyes ice pale with the kind of mercy that holds people still while someone else puts the cuffs on. Sloane Carter Hughes Boss Bell said, level as a carpenter's bubble, you're under arrest. It is a sentence that makes rooms smaller. Sloane didn't move. Rain stitched the balcony like a grandmother whose hands won't stop. Evie went to the slider and laid 2 fingers on the bump key, as if blessing it before dropping it into an evidence bag. For what Sloane said, and the absence of a question mark in her voice, made a sound I will hear again when I am too old for sounds. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, Bell said. Felony tampering. Burglary in the 2nd degree. Prescription fraud. Conspiracy. Additional charges pending toxicology. She nodded toward the ledger and the tablet and the envelope Dr. Patel had delivered in person an hour earlier when the power dipped and the plan led us to this hinge. You have no right to be in here, Sloane tried. I have a warrant, Bell said, not reaching for it yet. Signed at 8:15 p.m. by Judge Calhoun. We knocked at the front. You chose the balcony. Sloane's gaze cut to me, then back to the hallway where a 4th figure appeared. ADA Romero legal pad tucked to his side like a sermon. He kept his distance, let the arrest belong to the person who had come to claim it. Hands, Bell said. Sloane offered them with theater training wrists together, palms down angle for sympathy. The cuffs clicked, not loud, not cruel. Efficient. Steel does not gloat. It closes. You'll regret this, she said to me, not loud, but the kind of tone that used to make me excuse a child to her room. Everything you love depends on me more than you know. Everything I love depends on truth, I said, and wished I hadn't, not because it wasn't accurate, but because she would hear sermon where I meant inventory. They searched methodical cardigan pockets, the console drawer, the slim crossbody bag Sloane had left by the slider as if it belonged to the patio furniture. In the bag they found cash banded like a tidy book. 2 IDs with faces that were hers, and names that weren't a small amber vial labeled with a pet's name, and a human dosage, a travel bottle filled with pale powder that had never met a spice rack. Evie held the evidence bags open. Detective Bell sealed each with her thumb press, and a date the way Dr. Patel seals integrity to a label. Trent appeared from the hallway at last, hair punched up by the fists sleep makes. He took in the scene with the absorptive delay of a man who has relied on other people's narratives. What's going on, he asked, which is what men ask when they already know. We're leaving, Sloane said brightly, as if a dinner party had ended and the babysitter were on the clock. The cuffs shone at her wrists. Get the car. No, Bell said. Trent's mouth opened and closed. Sloane. He looked at me, then at the officers, then back to the ledger on the table like he wanted to argue with paper and had forgotten how. Mr. Hughes. Ada Romero said, voice neutral, if you have information that will clarify your role, counsel can be arranged before an interview. For tonight, stand aside. Trent's shoulders found a position that wasn't quite contrition and wasn't quite rage. He obeyed, which is a word that does not often get to be useful for him. They read Sloane her rights, plain unadorned, long enough to hang a life on. She listened like a woman in a seminar, auditing power. When they turned her toward the hallway, she pivoted her head back to me with a smile that didn't involve lips. You wanted a scene, she said. You built one. You came in through the balcony, I said. You built yourself. Evie's hand found my shoulder, not to steady me, to mark the moment's dimensions. After they walked Sloane out, the room tried to fill with commentary. It didn't. The generator hum lowered. The wind chime outside, drunk on weather, clacked itself calmer. I stood and smoothed the throw as if it mattered. Detective Bell returned from the door with a zippered pouch and a sheet for inventory. We'll have the pharmacy's records by morning, she said. Telehealth logs, too. Your physician's report is in. The lab confirmed high benzodiazepine serum hair segment consistent with extended exposure. Thank you, I said. The words were a tool. We also recovered a backpack from the fire stairs, she continued. Cash, prepaid phones, a list of addresses, 2 passports, and a secondary chemical. Our tech on scene did a presumptive test that's trending positive for ethylene glycol. The lab will confirm. I nodded once. I did not say James's name in that moment. Saying it would hand the room a different weight than it had chosen. Ada Romero flipped his legal pad and spoke without flourish. Given what we have, we'll be filing on multiple counts. Exploitation, tampering, burglary, fraud. I expect the lab will allow attempted homicide charges on the sedatives alone. With the break-in, the court will remand her in custody. He hesitated, not for effect. For care. I will not advise you in this room on anything except rest. We'll talk when the sun in the courthouse open. Evie looked at me, and I looked at the ledger. The tab still faced the room like a compass that hadn't lost north. Bell collected the bump key from the evidence bag and left me the empty console space where it had rested, a little scar the table would keep. She slid a card onto the mantel and squared James's photo so the angle he would have preferred returned. Lock the interior doors. You can lock, she said. Not because of us, because it's a storm. After the officers and the law and the rain's loudness receded into a bearable thing, Evie brewed tea that had nothing to do with sleep. We sat without television. The house returned to its familiar math dimensions James measured with his tape, thresholds I've crossed 1,000 times with groceries, with casebooks, with quiet. The slider held. On the console, the evidence receipt lay under a paperweight James made from walnut and brass. In the hall, the wind lifted and let go, lifted and let go. I walked to the kitchen, set the blue tumbler upside down to dry, and left it that way. Dawn arrived without ceremony, a milky light that made the rain look tired of its own insistence. The generator idled down and the house exhaled. I walked the rooms the way you do after company leaves, not to admire them, but to see what the night had done. The slider held. The wind chime, wet and repentant, touched itself once and went still. By 8, the refrigerator hummed like a citizen again, and the kettle consented to boil without an app. I made coffee in a pot James refused to replace because the handle had learned his hand. The blue tumbler stayed inverted on the rack, a small lighthouse of its own drawing. Evie came through the side gate with bakery paper and the steadiness of a woman who has memorized other people's thresholds. We ate biscuits at the kitchen island with butter that didn't need to be explained. She said little. I said less. We let the morning bind itself without commentary. At 9, Detective Bell returned with a clipboard and a face that had slept just enough to be permitted to stand. She reviewed the inventory, confirmed the pickups left copies where copies should live. I signed my name twice, then a third time where she pointed. Officers will circle through daylight, she said. If you go out, text me. If you stay in lock, what locks? We'll be in court before noon. Understood, I said. She squared the cinnamon jar on the rack with the same unconscious grace she'd used on James's picture and left by the front like a neighbor. The door clicked with a confidence I had missed. I showered and dressed in the quiet utility clothes of a widow who has Aaron's cotton blouse cardigan with amended cuff shoes that walk better than they look. I braided my hair with the lock Dr. Patel had taken missing from its usual place. No one sees the difference. I felt it. The courthouse kept its air on high. ADA Romero's tie had found a blue that pretended not to be deliberate. We sat outside a chamber where a judge read warrants the way bakers read recipes, precisely with the knowledge that small errors multiply. I answered what I was asked and nothing I wasn't. Romero nodded when I chose silence over decoration. He didn't praise me for it. He didn't have to. By early afternoon, the papers were filed and the papers were stamped, which is a rhythm America believes in. I returned home along streets that had rinsed themselves clean and found voices on my porch, 2 women from the Historical Society umbrellas under arms like polite spears. We saw the column. One said, "If you ever decide to formalize that idea about the house." I did. I said, and her mouth made a small O at the tense. I invited them in and set a pen on the dining table where James would have measured drawer slides. We pulled the folder labeled Ledger and another labeled Deed and let the paperwork say what I was not in the mood to rehearse. The magnolia in the yard dropped one glossy leaf while we signed. The leaf landed right side up. I took it as a kindness and not a portent. Word moves in Charleston the way water does around corners and into places it wasn't invited. By midweek, a law school friend sent a note about office space. A church lady called to ask after casseroles, and a junior reporter with good shoes asked for a quote I didn't give. I kept appointments that needed keeping and canceled ones that didn't. I took the blue tumbler down and gave it to Evie to keep sugar packets in. She laughed and said sugar needs a sterner jar. The living room learned its old furniture again. The ledger moved to a drawer and stayed there without sulking. I slept on my left side because my right keeps accounts after nights like that. The house remembered me. I remembered how to inhabit it. People stopped by with their lives folded into disposable containers. A man from 2 streets over brought a stack of Know Your POA flyers from a clinic he volunteers at and asked if I wanted to add a paragraph about guardianship. I told him to add 3. A librarian offered a meeting room once a month and a poster board easel that had shepherded 100 story times into speech. The pastor's wife sent a text that said, "Potluck Sunday will save you a seat," and attached a photo of a long table in a fellowship hall where paper plates looked like sincerity. On a warm evening, I carried a small box to James's workshop. I set it on the bench where he used to knock Tanan's home with a mallet that knew its job. In the box, the bump key in a sealed bag, the cinnamon lid, the post-it with Evie's first notes, a thumb drive labeled in my hand. I added a walnut scrap he had planed so thin you could see light at the edges. I closed the box in the drawer and turned the key. The magnolia bloomed again late for the season and stubborn. Its petals kept their white even when the rain came sideways. I sat on the porch with coffee while the city tried on evening and watched neighbors walk dogs that had learned the leash as a language. The wind chime minded itself. Across the street, a boy practiced free throws into a net that had surrendered to weather years ago. He missed, and then he didn't again, His mother clapped once and went back to her phone. The clap counted even if she didn't look up. I held the railing and understood the kind of relief that doesn't announce itself. It sits. It keeps. Inside, I set a flyer on the dining table Blue Magnolia Project at the top, in a serif that refuses fuss legal clinic hours, a hotline number that rings to a desk where law students learn to listen first. I placed James's walnut and brass paperweight on the corner. It landed with the authority of a thing made to hold paper still while decisions get inked. That night, the house made its old noises and none of the new ones. I checked the doors twice because twice suits me. I left the hallway lamp on low for no one in particular. I poured water from the tap into a clear glass and drank it without thinking about cinnamon or collagen or whether any of it had plans for me. The glass clicked soft against the counter when I set it down. I lay in bed and listened past the wind chime to crickets and tires and the small negotiations of a neighborhood readying itself to sleep. I did not rehearse testimony or inventory drawers in my mind. I did not count. I let my breath be ordinary in a room that knows my ordinary. When the air moved through the magnolia, it carried a scent that refuses to brag. I closed my eyes where I meant to and slept like someone who recognizes the ceiling above her. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.